"Sir," the manager says coldly, "I'm going to ask you one last time. Take the dog and leave." Staff Sergeant Cole Matthews looks up slowly. His face, worn by years of dust, smoke, and blood, remains calm. Beside him sits Ranger, his service dog, his lifeline, his only living witness to the war that followed him home. Ranger doesn't bark. He doesn't growl. He just watches the manager with alert, unblinking eyes. His vest clearly reads "Service Dog, Medical Alert." Cole speaks softly. "He's not a pet. He's my partner. He's kept me breathing more nights than I can count." But the manager scoffs, brushing aside the law and the dignity of the man before him. "You're disturbing the other guests. We don't want dogs in here." A few customers glance away. Others pretend not to hear. Cole grips Ranger's leash and rises. His movements are slow, measured, controlled like a soldier trained to keep emotion buried beneath duty. He turns to leave. But just as he opens the door, a rumble grows in the distance. It starts low, then swells into a roar. Engines. Heavy. Loud. Like thunder over dry land. 8 motorcycles screech into the parking lot. Dust and gravel explode beneath the wheels. The door swings open again, this time not by Cole, but by a wall of men wearing black leather vests that read, U.S. Marine Corps, 2nd Battalion, Semper Fi. What happens next will silence the entire diner and remind everyone watching that loyalty, brotherhood, and respect never go out of style. Sometimes, it only takes one person to remind us of what truly matters. If you've ever questioned the value of loyalty or respect, this story will hit close to home. So, sit tight, hit that like button, and let's see if you're ready to stand up for what's right. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I'll shout you out in the next video and personally reply to every single comment, so don't be shy. Let's hear from you. Before that morning in the diner, Cole Matthews had already fought more battles than most could survive. Not all of them were fought with bullets. Some came in silence, in the night sweats, the fractured memories, and the empty space on the passenger seat of his truck where Ranger now sat today. Cole had been a career soldier. 20 years. 2 tours in Iraq. 3 in Afghanistan. One long scar down his left shoulder told the story of a suicide bomber who got too close. But it wasn't just the wounds on his body that changed him, it was the ones in his mind. He lost his team in Kandahar. The blast came out of nowhere. Dust turned to flame. When the smoke cleared, only 2 were alive, Cole, pinned beneath debris, and the German shepherd who had been assigned to his unit for bomb detection. Ranger. The dog had dug him out, barked for help, refused to leave his side. In a hospital bed, Cole made a decision. When the military offered him discharge, he asked one question: what happens to the dog? They told him the dog would be reassigned. Cole said no. Either we both go home, or neither of us does. The paperwork was a battle of its own. But eventually, they let him keep Ranger. And Ranger kept him alive. Night after night, when the weight of memory threatened to pull him under, Ranger pressed against his chest. When panic stole his breath in the grocery store or the subway or the middle of a thunderstorm, Ranger would anchor him to the present. That morning, Cole had only wanted eggs and coffee. A quiet moment. A place to breathe. But even in peacetime, some people treat soldiers like ghosts, there, but unwelcome. And yet, even ghosts remember who they are. The bell above the diner door jingled as Cole stepped inside, the sound too sharp, too cheerful for how heavy his chest felt. He'd parked around back, an old habit from his deployment days. Always know your exits. Always watch your 6. Ranger padded in beside him, nails clicking softly against the tile floor. A few customers turned to glance, then looked away like they hadn't. One man stared at the dog with visible disapproval. A woman shifted her purse closer to her side, eyes narrowing. Cole felt it instantly. That shift in energy. He didn't expect a hero's welcome. He hadn't expected anything at all, but he had hoped for one small thing, a hot meal and a quiet place to sit. That wasn't too much to ask. Not for a man who'd eaten MREs under artillery fire. He chose a corner booth, facing the door. Ranger laid down, alert but still, resting his chin on Cole's boot. The waitress approached, hesitated. He's with you. Cole nodded once. Is my medical alert dog. I've got the paperwork. She mumbled an okay and walked away, not writing anything down. Cole didn't need the menu. He'd eaten at 100 diners just like this one. Scrambled eggs. Toast, no butter. Black coffee. He leaned back and exhaled slowly. Ranger looked up at him, ears perked slightly. The two shared a silent language. Years in the field had taught them that. Then he saw it, just over the napkin holder. A wrinkled flyer, half-torn and taped to the wall. 2nd Battalion Marine Vets, Ride Along Meetup, today, noon. Location, Tilly's Diner. Cole's eyes narrowed. That was today. That was now. He didn't know if it was fate or coincidence. He didn't believe in signs. But the timing made his throat tighten just a bit. He reached down and scratched behind Ranger's ear. Looks like we picked the right spot. Huh, boy. Ranger gave a low huff, his version of agreement. But across the diner, the manager was already watching them. Already walking their way. And that's when the trouble started. The manager's shoes clicked across the tile like nails tapping glass. Sharp. Deliberate. Meant to be heard. He was a tall man, too clean for a place that smelled like grease and old coffee. His name tag read Ken, General Manager. But the way he squared his shoulders, you'd think he ran the Pentagon. Cole didn't flinch. He sat upright, calm, steady, years of discipline still etched into his bones. Ranger lifted his head, eyes tracking the man without moving an inch. "Sir," the manager said, already wearing a fake smile. "I'm going to have to ask you to take your dog outside." Cole kept his voice even. "He's a service animal. I have federal protection under the ADA. I can show you the documents." Ken waved a hand dismissively. "That won't be necessary. Our policy is no pets in the dining area." "Is not a pet," Cole replied. "Is trained. Medical alert. I'm a disabled vet." The word vet hung in the air like a flare in the dark, but Ken didn't blink. "Doesn't matter," he said, glancing toward the other tables. "You're making customers uncomfortable." Cole scanned the room. One man avoided eye contact. A couple with a toddler looked genuinely confused. But most just stared at their plates, pretending the conversation wasn't happening. Ranger stood now. Not aggressive. Just alert. The hair along his spine barely raised. Enough for Cole to notice. Enough to know Ranger sensed what was unspoken. Danger wasn't always loud. Sometimes it crept in with nice shirts and name tags. "I'm not leaving," Cole said quietly. "You're violating federal law." Ken crossed his arms. "Then I'll call the police." Cole exhaled slowly, jaw tight. He'd faced down insurgents with IEDs in their backpacks. He could handle a man like this. But still, it burned. He stood, slid a $5 bill under his untouched coffee, and reached for Ranger's leash. "Come on, buddy." As they turned toward the door, the air in the diner seemed to hold its breath. And then, the sound. Low, steady, then growing louder. Engines. At first, it was faint, like thunder crawling low across the sky. Then the sound multiplied. Not one engine, but several. Deep, guttural, synchronized. The kind of sound that turns heads before you even see what's coming. Ken paused halfway toward the phone behind the counter. His eyes flicked to the windows. Outside, dust spiraled into the air. Then they appeared, one by one. 8 motorcycles. Big ones. Black and chrome. American flags fluttering off the back of 2. One had a patch on the seat that read Kandahar '09. Another had a helmet painted with a battlefield cross, boots, rifle, and helmet. They didn't park like regular customers. They pulled up hard, lying shoulder to shoulder across the front of the diner like a barricade. The engines shut off all at once, leaving an eerie silence in their place. Inside, the diner stood still. Cole didn't move from the doorway. Ranger, standing firm beside him, tilted his head. The front door creaked open again, not by Cole this time, but by the first Marine who stepped inside. He was wide in the shoulders, bald, sunglasses reflecting the fluorescent lights. His vest read, 2nd Battalion, Marine Corps Vets. Semper Fi. Behind him came another, then another, until 5 of them stood at the entrance like living statues. Dust still clung to their boots. They didn't smile. They didn't speak, but when the first Marine saw Cole, his expression changed. "Matthews," he said, voice low, gravelly. "Staff Sergeant Cole Matthews." Cole blinked. It had been nearly 15 years. But he knew that voice. "Ramirez," Cole said. Ramirez grinned. "Damn right." Then his eyes shifted to Ranger. "Still got your partner, huh?" Cole nodded once. "Still keeping me alive." Ramirez's smile faded as he looked past Cole to the manager, now pale and backing toward the counter. "You mind telling me why one of our own was just asked to leave?" Ken stammered. I didn't know." Ramirez stepped forward, slow and purposeful. "Yeah, that's the problem." The diner, once humming with the quiet clatter of forks and dishes, now held a silence thick enough to choke on. Ramirez stepped forward, the sound of his boots hitting the tile like a slow drumbeat. Behind him, the other Marines fanned out, silent, solid, unflinching. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't have to. Cole stood still in the doorway, Ranger pressed close to his leg. His jaw was locked, but not out of anger. Out of habit. He hadn't needed backup in a long time, but somehow, they came anyway. Ken, the manager, backed into the counter. His fake confidence wilted. I wasn't trying to offend anyone. It's just policy. You know, health code. Health code, Ramirez repeated, his voice calm but sharp enough to draw blood. You kicked a disabled vet out over health code. His dog probably has more training than you do. Someone at a nearby table snorted. A teenager tried to hide a smile. A waitress froze mid-pour with a pot of coffee trembling in her hand. Another Marine stepped forward, this one older, his hair gray beneath his cap. "You know what this man's done?" he asked, gesturing toward Cole. "You know what that dog's done? Probably dragged his unconscious body out of more danger than you've ever imagined." Ken opened his mouth, then closed. Ramirez turned back to Cole. "You want to eat here, brother?" Cole hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no. Pride could be a bitter pill. But Ranger gave his leg a nudge, like he always did when Cole was stuck in his own head. Cole glanced at the empty booth in the corner. "I could go for some eggs," he said quietly. Ramirez grinned. "Then we'll all eat." The Marines turned in sync, pulled out chairs, filled the booth, lined the counters. A waitress, still stunned, whispered, "Should I bring menus?" "No need," said the gray-haired Marine. "We'll take everything hot, and a bowl of water for the real hero." He nodded at Ranger, who blinked slowly, tongue out. And just like that, the tide had turned. Justice didn't come in a badge that day. It rode in on 2 wheels. Plates clattered louder now, not from tension, but from motion. The kitchen had suddenly come alive, orders flying, burners blazing. The staff, still a bit stunned, moved fast. No one wanted to keep a table full of hardened Marines waiting. The waitress, whose hands still trembled slightly, placed a bowl of water down by Ranger. "Is beautiful," she said, her voice soft as she crouched. Ranger looked at her, then gave one gentle wag of his tail. It was enough to make her smile. Cole sat back in the booth, sandwiched between men he hadn't seen in over a decade. Ramirez sat across from him, fingers drumming lightly on the table, eyes scanning the room like he was still on patrol. Cole broke the silence. "I didn't think anyone would remember." Ramirez looked up. Remember? Brother, we never forgot. Another Marine, Thompson, if Cole remembered right, nodded from the end of the table. You patched up my leg outside Old Karma. That IED split the Humvee clean through, and you still ran in. Dragged me out like it was nothing. I was just doing my job. No, Ramirez said, leaning forward. You went beyond it. You saved lives. That doesn't get erased just because people back home forget how to say thank you. Cole didn't respond. Couldn't. His throat clenched around the lump rising fast. Ranger nudged his hand again, grounding him. Across the room, Ken stayed behind the counter, watching from a distance. His arms were folded, but there was no more arrogance in his posture. Just confusion. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. It didn't matter. No one invited him back to the table. Then Thompson spoke again, softer this time. We came here today for the reunion, but I think we were meant to be here for this. For you. Cole finally looked around the table, faces worn, eyes sharp, hands rough with the years. He wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in a long time, the weight on his shoulders eased. The buzz in the diner was palpable now. What had been a quiet lunchtime crowd was quickly becoming a spectacle. The regular hum of conversation and clinking silverware was replaced by soft murmurs, heads turning as they tried to understand what they were witnessing. Ken, now behind the counter, shifted nervously. He had expected the Marines to eat and leave, but this wasn't a regular crowd. Something had changed. Matthews, Ramirez said, breaking the silence as he picked up his fork. You ever think about what you gave up? The question hung heavy in the air. Cole hesitated, his fingers tightening around his coffee cup. I try not to, he said quietly. It's easier that way. Ramirez nodded, acknowledging the weight of the truth between them. We all gave up something, but you came back. A lot of us didn't. The words hit Cole harder than he expected. I didn't come back. I was dragged back. The table fell silent as the Marines exchanged looks. They all knew the scars Cole spoke of, visible and hidden. But before the moment could linger too long, a voice broke through the quiet. I'm leaving, a man at a nearby table called out. He stood, his chair scraping loud. If you can't respect these men, I won't stick around. His voice was followed by another, then another, until several patrons stood and walked out. Ken's face flushed as the last few customers left, the weight of their silent protest heavy on his shoulders. The diner was empty now, save for the Marines. Outside, the streets hummed with the noise of the city, but inside, there was a heaviness that lingered in the air. The last of the patrons had trickled out, leaving only a few staff behind, staring at the exit in disbelief. Ken's shoulders slumped, his back against the counter, but his eyes never left the Marines. He knew this wasn't just a random event. He could feel it. This wasn't something that would fade away when the meal was over. This was bigger than him. Ramirez shifted his weight, eyes scanning the empty room, then turning to Cole. His voice was firm, a quiet command. We don't leave until we make it right. The other Marines nodded in agreement, no hesitation in their movements. The table full of men who had once shared a battlefield were now standing as one, like they always had. They weren't just fighting for Cole anymore, they were fighting for something deeper. For respect. For honor. Cole, still seated, hesitated for a moment. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, wasn't used to having people stand for him. But he'd fought beside these men. And now, they were fighting for him. As the silence stretched, the sound of footsteps grew loud. Ken looked up, but it wasn't the footsteps of more customers. It was the Marines, standing tall and moving together, like a unified force, heading for the door. The door swung open with a soft chime, and outside, the familiar sound of motorcycles revved to life. Cole stood slowly, his hand brushing against Ranger's fur. Let's go, he said softly. The Marines moved as one, a force of unity and purpose. Outside, the Marines stood in a line, their boots firm on the pavement, the hum of the engines surrounding. The silence that had filled the diner now hung in the air like a weight, but there was a sense of resolution. The city hadn't changed overnight, but the people had. Cole's hand rested on Ranger's head as he looked at his brothers in arms. The tension wasn't gone, but it felt manageable. As long as they stood together, as long as they didn't forget the bond they shared, the world didn't stand a chance at tearing them down. Ken stood in the doorway, watching from a distance. His eyes shifted between the Marines and the now quiet Dinah behind him. His hands trembled once more, but this time it wasn't out of anger. It was regret. Regret for how he'd treated a man who had given so much. Regret for not seeing the value of loyalty until now. But Cole wasn't angry. He wasn't looking for revenge, just for respect. A lesson learned, a bond reforged. As the last of the Marines climbed onto their motorcycles, Cole took a deep breath. This was his moment of peace. The crowd had scattered, but the message had been delivered. The men inside the diner, those who had stayed behind to honor brother, knew the truth. Respect, loyalty, and honor weren't just words. They were the foundation of something that could never be erased. And with that, they drove off into the horizon, leaving behind the echoes of a battle fought and won. Hit that like button if you believe respect is earned, not given. Drop a comment below if you've ever witnessed a moment when loyalty was tested. And let's be honest, have you ever stood up for what's right, even when no one was watching? Don't just watch this story. Let it remind you to live with honor and stand for those who've given everything. Share this with someone who needs to remember the power of respect. You never know, it might just change someone's day.